Hi everyone, my name is Nesayeli Duke and this is a presentation on Ethiopia. Ethiopia is Africa's second most populous country, an ethnic federation of regional states, and Tigray is its northernmost region of about 6 million people. Between November 2020 and November 2022, a civil war there killed hundreds of thousands. Larger through massacre, siege, and starvation. Thank you. Who was involved? Victims and perpetrators. Our victims are Tigrayan civilians, a region of roughly 6 million people, Amhara and Afar civilians, as the fighting spread south and east in 2021. Women and girls were targeted in a systematic conflict related to sexual violence, children, the displaced, and 16,000 Eritrean refugees already sheltering in Tigray. We have our armed actors, which are the Ethiopian National Defense, unfortunately, Eritrean Defense Forces fighting on Ethiopian soil alongside federal troops, Amhara regional militants, and Fano paramilitaries, Tigray People's Liberation Front, and the Tigray Defense Forces also documenting committed abuses. The observers and responses were the African Union, which meditated the 2022 ceasefire, United Nations, OHCHR, the ICHREE Commission, and the WFP, among others. So what happened during this period? We had massacres and extrajudicial killings of civilians, including large-scale killings at Axiom and Mia Khadra. We had sexual abuse, which UN investigators concluded amounted to war crimes and crimes against humanity. Starvations used as weapons. The USHMM and others documented the deliberate obstruction of food and aid. An estimated 150,000 to 200,000 people had died of starvation by March 2022. The destruction and looting of hospitals, crops, seeds, stocks, and livestock. 89% of Tigray's population came to need food aid. Drone strikes on civilian areas, including camps and for the displaced. Ethnic profiling, mass detentions, and forced displacements, notably in the western Tigray area. A near total blackout. Internet, telephones, banking, fuel, electricity cut for close to 2 years, concealing the scale of violence. So when did this happen? This is our timeline of the events that took place. On November 4th through 3rd to the 4th in 2020, TPLF forces attacked the Federal Northern Command bases. Abiy launched an offense and cutted communication to Tigray. On November 2020 to 2021, Eritrean troops entered Ethiopia. Mekelle fell on November 28th. Massacres and mass sexual violence are documented. On June 2021, Tigrayan forces retake Mekelle. A federal unilateral ceasefire becomes a de facto cease and blockade. Late 2021, fighting spreads into Amhara and Afar. A national state of emergency is declared as forces advance south. March through August of 2022. A humanitarian truce briefly reopens aid corridors, then collapses. Renewed offenses and drone strikes follow. On November 2nd, 2022, the African Union Pretoria ceasefires ends large-scale fighting. And after 2022, the humanitarian crisis continues by 2025 to 2026. The settlement phase and fighting resumes in the north. So where did it happen? Northern Ethiopia, Tigray is the country's northernmost region, roughly 6 million people, bordering Eritrea to the north and Sudan to the west. Mekelle, the region capital, fell to the federal and Eritrean forces in November 2020 and was retaken by Tigrayan forces in June of 2021. The war spilled into the neighboring Amhara and Afar regions during 2021. Western Tigray, contested and occupied throughout, is where ethnic cleansing was most extensively documented, and its status remains unresolved. Refugees fled west into eastern Sudan, about 62,500 by April 2021. Inside Tigray, some 350,000 displaced people crowd into the town of Shire alone. So what caused the civil war? It was a power struggle between Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the TPLF, which had led the ruling EPRDF coalition for 27 years before Abiy's rise in 2018. Abiy dissolved the EPRDF into a single prosperity party. The TPLF refused to join and withdrew to Tigray. The TPLF, it's like a tribal police of the Tigray region. Elections during the 2020 national vote was postponed over COVID, so Tigray held its own regional elections that September. Each side then declared the other illegitimate. A structural coalition between federal authority and regional autonomy under Ethiopia's ethnic federalism is another cause, or it's the main cause. There was a long-standing ethnic grievances, including competing Amhara Tigrayan claims into Western Tigray. So, what was the global response during the Civil War? The world responded with human rights bodies. The USHMM, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International treated the violence as mass atrocities and possible genocide. Western governments condemned grave human rights violations but stopped short of declaring genocide. African Union mandated the November 2022 cessation of hostilities, no military intervention, no peacemakers, no Security Council sanctions. United Nations created the ICHREE commissions of experts and warned repeatedly about starvation, sexual violence, and blocked access. The United States and European Union targeted sanctions, suspended aid, and trade preferences, sustained diplomatic pressure. Humanitarian agencies tried to deliver food and medicine, but access was blocked for long stretches. Starvation as a weapon made relief nearly impossible. So how does Tigray and the Holocaust compare? Some similarities are is a specific group singled out. Jews and other groups under Nazi rule, Tigrayans through killing, starvation, and sexual violence. Dehumanizing official language in both cases, with the target group described as cancer or as weeds to be cleared. Systematic, organized atrocities, destruction of livelihoods, forced displacements, and attempts to erase a group's identity. And of course, deliberate control of information to hide the scale of the killing. Some of the differences are scale and method. Roughly 6 million Jews were murdered through industrialized extermination in camps. In Tigray, hundreds of thousands died through massacres, siege, and starvation. Context: a totalitarian regime with an explicit racial ideology during a world war versus civil war among multiple armed actors over political power. And of course, accountability. The Holocaust produced the Nuremberg trials and the 1948 Genocide Convention. Tigray has produced no tribunal and little accountability. Allied military victory in the liberation of camps versus negotiated ceasefire that left parties in place. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.